Before the Marvel Cinematic Universe turned crossovers into a billion-dollar group project, there was 1967, scrappier, weirder, and honestly a lot more willing to throw hands and figure it out later. No master plan, no phase one roadmap, just two mass vigilantes stumbling into the crime scene and immediately decided, yeah, we're probably gonna fight about this. And that's exactly what the Green Hornet delivers. A stylish one-season wonder that somehow managed to introduce real martial arts to American television, launch a global icon, and quietly invent the crossover long before Hollywood knew it could monetize one. Now, the shits and giggles part is the Hornet didn't even start on TV. He came crawling out of the radio era in 1936, broadcasting from WXYZ, the same place that cooked up the Long Ranger serials. Only this time the hero wasn't a clean-cut cowboy riding into the sunset. This guy was playing both sides of the law like a con artist with a press pass. Britt Reed, newspaper publisher by day, criminal mastermind by night, running cons on actual criminals while the police chased him like he was public enemy number one. Now, before we even get to television, it's worth remembering the Hornet had already done a tour through the movies, specifically two Universal serials in 1940 and 1941, The Green Hornet and The Green Hornet Strikes Again. These were the old school cliffhanger kind where every episode ends with someone about to die in a way they absolutely will not die in next week. Warren Hull and Keye Luke played Green Hornet and Kato respectively in those series, bringing a calm, capable presence to the role decades before it would explode into something else entirely. The show back then was pretty standard pulp, heroic, straightforward, a little rough around the edges, but still firmly in that good guys versus bad guys lane without too much moral gray era. It's a great gimmick because it lets him operate in that morally gray space long before superheroes started brooding about it in IMAX. Fast forward to 1966, and television is absolutely drunk on the success of everything is bright, loud, and dripping in pop art camp. Producer William Dozier looks at that and basically says, what if we took the exact setup and removed all the fun? Okay, not literally, but the contrast is hilarious. The Green Hornet plays it completely straight. No pow graphics, no winking at the camera, just a dead serious vigilante cruising around in Black Beauty like he's late for a sting operation that might actually go sideways. And to keep it a buck, Black Beauty is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It's all tricked out Chrysler Imperial loaded with gadgets that feel one step removed from a James Bond fever dream, complete with gas guns, scanners, and a rotating garage because subtlety is for civilians. Van Williams plays Britt Reed with his charm, almost eerie confidence, like he's 10 steps ahead of everyone else in the room, including the audience. The show looks slick, moves fast, and never once breaks character to remind you it's supposed to be fun. Again, let's keep it a buck for a second. The real reason anyone remembers this show isn't the car, the gadgets, or even the premise. It's Bruce Lee. He shows up as Kato and immediately turns what was supposed to be a sidekick role into the main event without even trying that hard. This wasn't Hollywood fight choreography where everyone politely waits their turn to get punched. Lee insisted on doing it his way, and suddenly American audiences were watching actual martial arts on primetime TV and realizing, oh, this is what fighting is supposed to look like. The stories about it are almost funny in hindsight. Lee's movements were so fast they had to slow the footage down just so people could see what actually happened, and Van Williams started training with him just to avoid looking completely outclassed on screen.
Meanwhile,
Meanwhile, over in Hong Kong, nobody was pretending this was an ensemble show. It was basically rebranded as The Kato Show because of course it was. Lee wasn't just about stealing scenes, he was about rewriting the entire energy of the series every time he stepped into frame. Then you get to the crossover, and this is where shit gets real. From cool trivia to wait, they actually did that? In 1967, Batman runs a two-part episode where the Green Hornet and Kato roll into Gotham chasing a counterfeit stamp racket, which is exactly the kind of oddly specific crime you only get in this era. They do the usual Hornet routine, pretend to be villains, infiltrate the operation, and immediately run into Batman and Robin, who naturally assume they're actual bad guys. So now you've got two sets of heroes, both convinced they're in the right, and instead of talking it out like reasonable adults, they just start swinging. The highlight obviously is Kato versus Robin, which is basically a live demonstration of reality colliding with camp. Bruce Lee is moving like a blur, and Burt Ward is doing his usual holy biff bam zoom routine, and somehow it all works because it commits so hard to the bit. Although Kato did outclass Robin, but I digress. What's bizarre is that this wasn't just some throwaway gimmick. This was a deliberate shared universe move orchestrated by Dozier, who was basically doing a proto-Kevin Feige work decades before the job description existed. Little crossovers, background cameos, subtle connections. It was all there, just without the marketing machine screaming about it every 5 minutes. And then just as quickly as it arrived, the Green Hornet was gone. One season, 26 episodes, canceled because the ratings couldn't keep up with Batman's louder, campier appeal. ABC was hemorrhaging money. The audiences wanted more color and less grit, and the show just didn't fit the mood of the moment. It's one of those classic cases where being a little ahead of your time turns into a death sentence instead of a legacy, at least at first, because the legacy didn't come just not right away. Bruce Lee goes on to become a global phenomenon, redefining action cinema as we know it. The show itself becomes a cult favorite, partly because it's generally good and partly because it feels like a missing link between old school pulp heroes and modern superhero storytelling. Even that Flight of the Bumblebee theme sneaks its way back into pop culture through movies like Kill Bill, because nothing this stylish ever really stays buried. Looking back, that grittier tone from the 1966 series is part of what makes the Green Hornet feel so ahead of its time. It's closer in spirit to what superhero media would eventually become, more grounded, a little darker, less interested in playing to the cheap seats. The problem is, in 1966, audiences weren't necessarily looking for that. They wanted the color, the humor, the spectacle. They wanted Batman dancing the Watusi or the Batusi, not the Hornet brooding. And that's the irony of it. The show that feels more modern now was the one that didn't survive back then. It was caught in between two eras, too serious to ride the camp wave and too early to define the darker tone that would come later. But between the radio roots, the serials laying the groundwork, and the 1966 series sharpening the edge, the Green Hornet quietly evolved into something a lot more dangerous than it first appeared. It just didn't get the chance to stick around long enough for everyone to notice, which, in a weird way, feels perfectly on brand. It proved you could ground a superhero story, bring real martial arts into the spotlight, and have characters from different worlds collide without the universe collapsing in on itself. It just did all of that quietly without a press tour or $1 billion box office to back it up. So, the next time the Marvel Cinematic Universe rolls out another carefully orchestrated team-up, it's worth remembering that back in 1967, two guys in masks were already doing it. No hype, no safety net, just a weird little story about counterfeit stamps that somehow made television history. If you made it this far, you already know this is a kind of forgotten television history that deserves way more attention than it gets. So if you're into deep dives on cult classics, weird crossovers, and the shows that walk so modern franchises could sprint, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a comment and let me know. Did the Green Hornet deserve more than just one season, or was it doomed the second it had to share airspace with Batman? And while you're at it, tell me what other retro series you want covered next, because there's a whole graveyard of underrated shows waiting to be dug up. Like the video if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who still thinks crossovers started with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Because in Pulp Vision, I don't just remember the past, I rewind it, dissect it, and give it the spotlight it should have had the first time.